connect on many editions that we've had, and of course, always an exciting event. This combined with, of course, great guest speakers and powerful networking in the virtual space. And as we know that the virtual space and the physical space will be a great combination of the future. So once again, I look forward to hosting this event this morning. Got a great guest speaker, of course, Noel Ross-Gillespie from Aramex, an executive at Aramex, is going to give some incredible insights into a topic called eCommerce Unpacked. But to all you out there, thank you very much for joining us. Please let us know where you're from. It's always nice to see where you're from and what your expectations are this morning. And also importantly, please, you can always pop onto the Aramex Lounge on the floor plan. You will see that there. Just click on it and engage whenever you want to. But Marcy, welcome, of course. Yvonne, welcome. It's always nice to see the familiar faces coming back time and time again. And but I think there's a very positive atmosphere out there. You know, there's almost that sense of normality coming back, and we see it to be quite vibrant at the moment. But of course, we do know that the pandemic is still around, and we've got to be cautious. But I think we're kind of tired of talking about the pandemic, but we've got to remain positive and resilient. And that's why so many entrepreneurs and SMEs out there have prospered so well, because of that personality trait within the entrepreneurial spirit of many business owners out there in South Africa. So a good morning, Ilana. Good to see you. Yes, Josiah, there we go, from Pretoria. It's amazing. You know, in this platform, we've seen people not only from all over South Africa, but from all over the world. And, you know, that was kind of not possible prior to pandemic in the physical environment. So the virtual environment presents some enormous positivity. It's allowed us to adapt, to think differently and do things differently. And of course, we need to have done that. We constantly need to do that. So I know that Noel's going to share some interesting.
Hello, Mike. How's it going?
Morning, Noel. Good to see you again, and thank you so much for taking your time out to engage with us this morning. It's because of people like you we can do what we do and to help others out there. And of course, to Aramex, who's a powerful national partner of the NSBC. We're very passionate about your commitment to SME South Africa, and you've recognized that it's an important space, and it's the mainstay of our economy. It's the future of alleviating unemployment and driving job creation. So to Aramex and people behind the organization like yourself, it's because of people like you and companies we to really foster the growth and sustainability of the SME sector, again repeating, with the ultimate aim of alleviating unemployment and driving job creation, and giving SMEs out there those all-important tools, insights, inspiration, education to stay in the game and build bigger and more successful businesses. And it's platforms like this what allows us to give business owners and entrepreneurs who run SMEs that extra edge to achieve their objectives and reach for their dreams. So Noel, thank you very much. And let me just give you a quick background, everybody, on Noel. I know he doesn't like people to talk about him, but unfortunately now I'm going to give a couple of words here. Noel is a highly qualified and has a long background in technology. Noel has spent 9 years building the fulfillment and retail capabilities of Yuppiechef. During this time, they scooped dozens of awards for customer experience and operational excellence, and even for their retail expansion. Of course, Noel now consults privately, as well as heading up e-commerce for Aramex South Africa. So Noel, a big welcome again. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to these insights from your side.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm going to leave you, Noel, and all the very best to you. And yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Morning, everybody. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak, and I do hope it's going to be an interesting session for everybody. As Mike alluded to, I've got a very varied background. I come from a tech background, and I'm an engineer by training. So I'm probably not the usual e-commerce career person, but this could be a glossary, a training, a concept session, could be any and all. So I'm aiming to start a decent Q&A at the end. That's really what I'm hoping to achieve. And I'm also hoping it's not an outright advert for Aramex. I mean, I've had nearly 10 years of working with them and for them now in the last 2. So my familiarity is obviously something I can lean on. But I think today's talk is really trying to be more about e-commerce in general, e-commerce concepts and principles. And I'm going to try and speak to what I imagine is the audience today, people who might be a little bit boggled with all the terminology that goes on in this space. We're very proud to be associated with NSBC as the courier partner. So I suppose that allows me to put some red onto things. So in the background, I've got Charlize. She's scanning the chat. My window's pretty full, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to attend to all the chats real time, but Charlize will be scanning those chat windows. So please throw questions in there. And if we've got time at the end, we can try and take the conversation along with where you'd like it to go. I certainly don't want to just bamboozle everyone with another speech and miss the Q&A. All right, so as Mike said, I spent a lot of time building systems. First it was in electronic space, then it was in e-commerce space. I built web systems for a web agency that I ran in town for a while. And obviously within Yuppiechef, I mean, it's a very pertinent experience. That included warehousing design, development of system flows, resource and staff, and importantly, peak planning, because e-commerce is not a linear through the year kind of busyness. It has its peak seasons and Black Fridays and Christmases and Mother's and Father's Day and all those different things. Depending where you're exposed, you might have peaks right now as load shedding, arrives, or when the water shedding was going on a while back. So it's really important not to gear your business up to handle that day to day. You just have too many resources sitting around when those peaks are not there. So that's experience you don't forget when you sort of have the sweat on your brow of having gotten through some of those peaks, and you know that the planning either worked or didn't work. But in that time, I also spent a lot of time dealing with couriers in general, not just our Aramex and RAM partners, but spent time with courier negotiations, retail design, built the stores. I mean, all the stores until about a year ago were stores that I'd literally gone in there and tightened screws in. So I'm very, very close to the Yuppiechef story. And as I say, that experience runs deep. So I can answer questions quite deeply as well. The other problem is that I can speak for hours and hours and hours on any of these topics. So my job today is going to be trying to distill what I'm speaking about. But one of the key things and what I really liked about Yuppiechef is we shared very generously to anyone interested. And I used to do a lot of the touring through warehouses, through systems, and I've carried that on. That's something that I'm very proud of being able to do at Aramex. And as much as I'm trying to build our e-commerce products and our e-commerce services and help our sales team to think about e-commerce differently, I love speaking to businesses like you and just hearing where you're struggling or what's going on, or how, sometimes fresh ears on a problem can yield some really simple but interesting insights. So I hope that what I say today is going to at least spark some thoughts, and we'll see where we go. When I left Yuppiechef, how did I get to Aramex? Well, I left Yuppiechef because I saw the wave, the COVID sort of related wave of e-commerce. And I thought this is a good platform to be able to speak to lots of businesses and hopefully share what I know about e-commerce. And at the same time, I felt that of all the couriers in the country, they had the best all-round competencies and capabilities. So how's that for a very subtle plug? I mean, I'm not trying to plug Aramex in particular, even though I kept all my notes in an Aramex flyer for today. Anyway, so let's get going. As I say, not going to try and talk the Aramex language too much, but it is getting pretty hot in here. So just going to take my top off a little bit, cool down. All right, so when we have new starters at the business, I train them on how to think about e-commerce. I try and give them the tools and the insights they need in terms of what are we actually trying to sell. We're not trying to just move a parcel from A to B. Okay, if we do that, we would end up exposing ourselves to all sorts of unnecessary risk with businesses that are not necessarily suitable for e-commerce. Okay, so some of the important topics I'd cover would be what are we selling and how are we selling? And most importantly, who are we aiming to talk to? So if you haven't heard from us before, don't assume that we've decided not to talk to you, because that is not the case. But I think in trying to talk to our salespeople, there are some businesses and some products that don't really lend themselves to e-commerce. Okay. And I'm going to try and unpack some of that today. And remembering here that I have been you for much of my life. I mean, I've been sitting, listening to couriers talk to them and planning how on earth we're going to make a box cost efficient to send with a courier. So one of those key topics that I think is really important to start with, so this is the first thing to write down, is basket density or rand density. Okay. And the way I'd explain this here is with a few examples. If you are running a business that, well, let's not personalize it. Somebody comes to us and says, we want to run a business and we're going to sell bottled water online. What I hear there is not a good business. Okay. The reason for that is because water is heavy. It's commoditized. I mean, it literally comes out of the taps. You can't sell it for a lot of money. And for the volume, it doesn't cost much. So it's got a low price to weight ratio. And as someone shops, let's assume they fill their basket up, which is always something that you want. You want a big basket value. But the problem is, as that basket goes up, so does the mass, so does the weight, so does everything. So let's assume that maybe 1 kilogram of water might get you 100 Rand revenue. That 1 kilogram is going to cost you a kilogram to ship. But to get the basket to 500 Rand, you're now shipping 5 kilograms. And as you know, couriers charge by weight. So water, not a great idea. It's heavy, it gets bulky, and you're not making much money on it. The flip side of that would be something like agricultural heirloom seeds. Okay, so how big is a seed? You know, it fits in. You can put thousands and thousands into a box. They are rarer. They're high margin because you could be selling some kind of very specialist, non-GMO heirloom plant as a seed. It weighs next to nothing, and it's got that very high rand density. So maybe that seed costs $50 because it's going to yield for 10 years. So it takes a lot of seeds to fill a tiny box. There's always room for another seed in a box. Maybe a kilo of seeds can fetch 10,000 Rand easily. Maybe one extra seed is 50 and it just fits, it disappears in there. So yeah, maybe by the same token, decorative mosaics or beads or something like that, which are expensive but almost tiny. Okay. The difference there is that your shipping charges for that box will disappear against your turnover. You know, if you're going to pay 100 Rand to deliver a kilo, or let's say 5 kilos, but you've made 10,000 Rand on that basket, courier charges are not even a factor. So you can now start paying for service, you can pay for reach, you can pay for speed, all sorts of things without feeling like, this courier charge is killing me. But go back to the water example. There's just no courier that's ever going to be cheap enough to make moving water feel, cheap enough. So it's important to not go and say liquids are bad and, small stuff is great, because that's not true either. I mean, shipping whiskey, that's a really good idea. If you can make sure it doesn't break in the trip, which involves packing and all sorts of other things, whiskey will fetch a terrific margin on that, and it's good business. Similarly, sending rare postage stamps, which are so tiny and they could easily get lost in the box and get thrown out and so on, or lost or damaged or something. I mean, that's bad business. So there's lots of nuances when I'm listening to a business say, this is what we do and this is what we want to try and move into e-commerce. Warms my heart when I see a message from Terry like that. Use Aramex all the time. Very good service. Thank you, Terry. All right, so that's the first one, basket density or rand density. And I hope that that's maybe clear. If you're selling a product that has a high rand density, probably we would be a good courier to talk to, because we're not going to be the cheapest, but it won't be as hard to justify that cost against your turnover. Okay. And by all means, throw questions in if any of these points sort of spark something in you, and we can try and get to them at the end. Next topic would be consolidation and volumes. So any courier is operating a network of vehicles across a country. That's just how it works. They don't very few of them, including the ones who say they run vehicles everywhere, aren't using agents. I mean, almost everyone is going to use agents somewhere to do a journey that is not a high enough volume route for them to do themselves. So it's very important when we look at a business to look at the types of areas that they're servicing, the weights, the frequency of those parcels, et cetera, because we would want to try and overlay their volumes on top of what we're already doing. That would mean that we're putting parcels into a truck that's already driving from A to B. We'd use Yuppiechef as an example maybe and say, what business is like Yuppiechef that would also be sending big density into Sandton or into, the sort of estates where a lot of Yuppiechef customers would have been buying from. Well, if it's high tier sports gear or perfumes, etc., then chances are the truck's already running there. We can put it in the truck and the costs will be low for that parcel. So we would run a data analysis, and that's not to try and pry and snoop into the types of business we're talking to, but it's to figure out what's the best way of running a rate card for that business. So if they're on existing routes, the costs are shared between all the other customers, and a courier, we could offer a better rate than we could on a new route, a different route. The converse would be, we talk to a business that loves selling, heirloom seeds, but they're selling to farmers in the middle of nowhere all the time. So these trips are not necessarily trips that we're doing often. And so, well, now we've got to think about how to achieve that. And there are different ways we can achieve that, because Aramex owns the Postnet network. We're trying to do a big push into click and collect. That helps just to lessen some of the costs for regional areas. We'll get into that topic a little bit later. But that would be how we're looking at the data and trying to understand who are we talking to from a coverage of country point of view. There are two real methods that couriers use here as well. There would be the type that do custom pricing for everybody, and Aramex is in that category. We would look at a business and say, these are the rates we can do your type of profile of work for a price. Then there's others that just operate flat rates or kind of a grid of prices for the whole country, and that's that. And I mean, prepaid flyers, prepaid boxes, stickers, etc. That type of model means that they're hoping that on average, their customers balance out. So the regionals, the main centers, the intracity, those volumes would balance out, and on average, they'd have a reasonable spread. That becomes very difficult when they're starting to be picked and chosen for certain routes and not other routes, okay? So you can imagine when you're dealing, I'm going way off script here at the moment, but if you're talking about a business that has 3 couriers, okay, and the rate card for a regional order, the courier's gone and tried to balance their prices and say, look, we're just always going to do a sort of prepaid sticker up to 5 kilos for this price. So they end up being very cheap on a regional leg, but somebody else who's optimized their business around just main center, they might always get the main center business and give all the regional, the hard work to this sticker price company. The problem then is that that sticker price company is doing a lot of hard work for not much money. And conversely, the other one's just doing easy work for decent money. So this is very complicated. And I guess the simple way of coming back to this is picking and choosing couriers based on certain prices ends up hurting couriers a lot, to the point that probably they walk away from business eventually because it doesn't work out. And that's why we would choose the former route. We'd say, have one relationship with us and let us do all your volumes, and we'll try and build that into a sensible rate card that makes sense all the time. Right, I'm gonna try to get back to my script here. The third thing that I would write down, okay? So that was, let's just recap, that was called consolidation and volumes, all right? So we would want consolidation and we want volumes to be able to offer great prices. The third one is hand-wavy long-term partnership appetite, okay? I'm gonna repeat that, hand-wavy long-term partnership appetite. This is my point of view, and I've had it for a long time. I held it all the way through Yuppiechef. It's that couriers are not all equal, okay? And the polish that appears after a long relationship, it's one of those intangible treasures. So if anyone asks me why has Yuppiechef had a good run for many, many years, I would say, well, it's had excellent partners and it's had an excellent partnership with Aramex. We've been able to build services alongside each other and really sort of ramp up the offering that we were able to provide to customers. And I mean, like I said, I build big systems. I have my whole life. I've always been more interested in big picture thinking and longer term plans than some short transactional, what can I do for this parcel right now? So we would be looking, Aramex would be looking for a client who's interested in building a partnership that over many years, hopefully, you end up going, you know what, we've just observed in the data, this is happening. How about we change it like this? Test it for a month, see what's happened. Okay, we've just had improvement there. And that leads to learnings and feedback loops and tech improvements and systems and better integrations and better tracking and better returns processes and everything like that. So those are important relationships. If you think about an e-commerce business, you've got your product, you've got a payment gateway, you've got your tech, and you've got your courier. The courier is the one that's touching customers the most. I mean, they are responsible for upholding your brand when you are no longer able to do that. You've given the parcel over, you want it to be done right. So to have a good, solid, trusting, proper relationship with your courier there, that's important because you can improve that and improve it and improve it. And you know that they would be invested in trying to sort that out too. Okay, I think that says the point. But those are three things that I would be training our team to be looking for. It's the partnership appetite, it's the data that substantiates a decent volume account, and it's this RAND density. There are plenty of other little things, but I think that says it. Thumbs up if you're all following me so far and this is kind of making sense. You can tap that little emoji on the right. Okay, that's a lot of good thumbs. Good, thank you very much. Wow, that's a lot of thumbs. Thank you. Okay, next topic. Okay, so this is now a sort of key topic here. How do couriers charge for services? Okay, because this is one of those important things. I've just alluded to the fact that they're fixed price, fixed envelope, sleeves, etc., etc. But how does it really work normally? Okay, and some of you may know this already. It might be common sense, but I'm going to go through it anyway, just so that it might jog questions later. First key thing for rates, okay? Where is the parcel going to? Okay, so usually there's a rate card which would specify a rate for a local delivery, which is something we would say is like intra-city. It's from Cape Town to another place in Cape Town, or it's from Sandton to Randburg or somewhere like that. It's round the corner. That would be considered the cheapest. The next one would be a main center, which would be like Sandton to Cape Town or Durban to Nelspruit or somewhere like that. Although Nelspruit, not everybody treats as a main center. And then you've got the regional. Okay, so that's city to city. It involves a sort of trip. It involves a drive to get something from one place to another. And then the last one would be regional. And that, by most definitions, is 50 kilometers from a main center. So once you're outside that 50K radius, it's involving some kind of agent or somebody else that is probably costing the courier much more money to go and deliver it. So it might be beyond the bounds. I mean, I use Hermanus as a good example. Hermanus is only about 110 Ks from Cape Town, but it's not worth our while in terms of volumes to go and drive out there every single day and deliver this great service. But somebody who delivers for 3 couriers, it makes sense for them to go to Hermanus. So that's where an agent crops up. They operate this point-to-point route, and we might use them for some of those further out regional areas. As a result, regionals cost us more money. They're not running our fleet. We've got to pay extra. These agents are usually far more pedantic about the weights and the DIMs and the actual cost of those parcels, where we might turn a blind eye and say, well, the truck's full and it's a sunk cost, so just move it from A to B. So that leads to these ideas of regionals costing a bit more, and sometimes that's achieved with regional surcharges. So costs your rate card plus 40 Rand or 50 Rand or something if it's going outside of that 50K radius. Okay, so it's the where to. Then there's the how quickly, how fast do you want that parcel to move? So usually you've got a concept like an overnight, you've got an express kind of as fast as you can on road, which doesn't mean speeding ever, but it does mean the minute we've got space on a truck, we'll put it on that truck and drive it. And then you've got an economy road service, which would be usually on the same truck as that express cargo. Put it on, off it goes. It's only during very peak seasons or busy seasons where that lower priority economy might get bumped for an extra day. So the timelines are slightly longer for economy parcels. So those are your 3 major services. And then overnight implies a flight. I mean, generally speaking, that's either a very quick line haul overnight or it's a flight overnight. And then your final metric for rates would be how big. And this is where it gets complicated. Okay, so I don't have a nice, a good example. Well, okay, I'll pick up this box. All right, so this box is empty at the moment. This weighs next to nothing, probably 300 grams. But if I measure it, it's 300 by 300 by, say, 4 or 5 centimeters here. And that would indicate its volumetric size, okay? There's a conversion factor which people speak of, which is called a volumetric factor. You take length, width, height, you multiply them, and you divide by a volumetric factor, and you end up with a number that is now comparable as a weight. So it becomes, this is probably a 1.6 kilo box by that measure. If this was empty, okay, and weighed nothing, but it's big, then the couriers will always charge you on the bigger of the two. So that becomes what's called the chargeable mass. If it was very, very heavy and super tiny, this little, oh, look, it's a red apple. If this red apple was actually made out of gold and weighed a ton, well, the fact that it's tiny doesn't matter because it's still very heavy and somebody's going to charge for the weight of that. So this concept of chargeable mass, and volumetric mass, not many people understand that. And the knock-on of that, and this is exactly where e-commerce gets complicated, because smaller businesses tend to want to do what's called live rates. So rather than an aggregate rate for all the business that they're going to do, or some kind of rate card that says, you know, we'll always charge you $120 if it's a main center order, they want to submit the dimensions, the weight, the mass, and get a live price. The problem with the live price is that this, let's go back to the apple. Okay, this is a very small thing, and it's just weighs what a normal apple weighs. So I might say to my customer, so now I'm you now, and I'm charging, I want to pass on the courier fee to them. And I want to say, okay, this pretty small thing, courier has quoted me $60 to deliver this to you. Please add $60 to your cart and check it out. Okay, that makes sense until the packer arrives and he goes, I can't pack an apple just like this. It needs bubble wrap, it needs this thing, and it needs this other thing. And I've run out of boxes that are this size. The next box is that size. Okay, in goes your apple with all the packing material, and it isn't a small item by the time the courier gets it. So the courier is going to charge it on the actual size of the box, and the volume has now gotten bigger, and they charge maybe 100 Rand for that delivery. And that's where live pricing falls over, because this idea of, as the volume gets bigger, usually people are charging some fee for that chargeable mass. Usually the retailer is going to under recover on the product that they're selling. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I received from a very reputable big e-commerce store a huge box. Must have been a volumetric, maybe 7 kilo box, maybe even 8 kilo box. Inside, 5 vacuum cleaner bags, this size, like that, weighing next to nothing. And I look at that and I think, somebody's paid a lot of money to ship that box. I don't know which courier dropped it off. I wasn't here, but that is exactly where e-commerce falls over. And it's important that everybody listening to this today is thinking, how do I not ship air? Okay, how do I not ship air? Because if you're shipping air, you're paying for that air to be shipped. And down the line, couriers are paying for that air to be shipped. And if we're having to use a line haul, we're busy paying extra price to move that air. It's just inefficient all around. And obviously, if you put your green hat on, it's bad for the planet as well. So yeah, that's an important thing that everybody understands, that volume, mass, all of these things relate. And packing the right size item into the right size box is really important. Coming back to my notes here. Okay, so I've spoken about live rates. Okay, so the way you mitigate this, in my mind, is think about your courier. Okay, let's take an example. You're shipping 500 items a month, or maybe 600 items a month. That might still feel like you're only doing 20 a day or 30 a day. Not even. What's that, like 3 a day, 4 a day? It's not a lot. But it's tempting to go, ooh, this particular item to ship cost me a lot of money, 140 Rand this courier wanted for this particular journey. The next one comes along and it's 60 Rand because it's a main center rate. Okay, that's all right. Don't worry about that. The next one comes along, 80 Rand. I'll leave that one. But this 140, I'm unhappy about. So now they go grind the courier about that 140. The reality is maybe that's the only 140 in the month. But small businesses tend to agonize over line item costs. Okay, and e-commerce is very tempting because you've got so much data to do that with. You've got, you can look at your orders exactly and see where it went to, and you see what items, and you think this is crazy costs for the courier. You've got to get away from that and think more about courier as a total percentage of your total turnover for some reporting time. And obviously a month is a convenient number, because then you might find that those 60s and 80s really leave the 140 as an outlier. And you can say, on average, I'm actually spending, let's say, 10% of my turnover on courier. Okay, if it's 10%, what would I like it to be? I'd like it to be 9%. Okay, now you can start thinking about trying to solve the 9% costs. And that leads to a far more sensible conversation than trying to go to live rates in the interest of trying to squeeze everybody and start ending up costing actually more, paying actually more for these sorts of situations. So sensible rates or average rates across the country make sense. And then generally speaking, if you're wanting to charge for courier, you need to pick a number that lessens that 10% of turnover. Okay, so let's say you decide you're going to go flat rates. You're going to charge every customer 80 Rand for delivery. In your mind, you know that when it's a 60 Rand delivery, you're scoring 20 Rand. When it's 80, you're breaking even. When it's 140, you're putting some money in. But on average, 80 Rand times your 600 wables for that month, it gets you to a point where you're happy and you go, okay, you know what, I'm paying now 3% of turnover for courier because I'm getting extra turnover for the shipping. That number I'm comfortable with. And then down the line, if fuel prices change or something else goes on and the courier cost nudges up, you just make it 85 Rand or 82 Rand on average. And again, it sort of sorts things out. My summary of this is avoid live rates, go for average rates, think about the country as a whole, and try and remove the notions of where it's going to and sort of typically what the mass and the weights are, because in that detail, you will probably get a little bit lost. I'm happy to go into more detail on this some other time, but I hope that point's been made. All right. Then that leads quickly on to what I would say is how I wish customers thought about e-commerce and particularly fulfillment. And this comes from my years sitting in Yuppiechef, where I was responsible not just for the courier cost, I was responsible for all the cost sitting on the fulfillment side. And so you can't just grind a courier. You can't keep grinding your couriers for cheaper rates all the time, because when the fuel price goes up and your vehicle costs more to fill, well, so do ours. So fuel cost is an unavoidable thing. Load shedding is unavoidable. Traffic jams and robots being off and everything else. I mean, that hurts everybody. It doesn't somehow miraculously dodge the couriers. But often people will go, it's the biggest bill that I get. I get a courier bill and it looks like 10% of turnover. So that's a big number. I've got to get down. The subtle spends along the way in the whole fulfillment process of your e-commerce business it's boxes, it's packaging material, it's tape, it's all sorts of other things. I mean, I think I was going to tell you the story, but I remember seeing a box. There was an umbrella delivered somewhere years back, and it wasn't a little handbag umbrella. It was like a Mary Poppins, meter and a bit long umbrella, and it was on sale somewhere. I don't want to name names, but it was one of the big companies where you'd expect this is thought about. And it went on sale for 200 Rand. And pictures started popping up on Facebook, like, look at my box. And this box was the size of a coffin. I mean, you could probably put at least a person inside that box, because the umbrella fitted diagonally across from one bottom corner diagonally up to the top corner. And I remember looking at that with my volumetric hat on, going like, that thing would have cost easily 300 Rand to ship somewhere, not mentioning a regional delivery, which would probably been 500-600 Rand. That umbrella was sold for 200 Rand, which means it probably cost 200 Rand. So somebody was not equating the volumetric cost with the packing process and with the actual item and with the promotions team. Who puts that umbrella onto promotion? It should have been given to a store to sell in retail, that sort of idea, where you're not paying to deliver it. So if you're thinking about the cost focus on the courier, you've got to think about this problem, okay, that if the box is not available on hand, that could very quickly go from being a tiny parcel to a much bigger one, and you're paying the volumetric charge of that. But you're also thinking, again, in this situation, the box costs more the bigger it gets. You're putting more packaging material inside, you're probably using more tape, and all of those little things, I promise you, they add up. So the other thing to think about is that a courier that's well integrated saves all sorts of other costs. So it's not just about the rand cost of moving a parcel from A to B. It's things like, well, if somebody's double capturing, they're taking some information, they're retyping it into a screen, okay, that takes 3 minutes, 4 minutes every time. If they're having to hit print, that takes another minute. If they're having to load paper, that takes a few minutes. If they're having to make phone calls to a customer service call center somewhere, that takes a lot of time and probably a lot of enamel on the teeth because you're getting frustrated with that process. You've got to look at the bigger picture of what a courier is or isn't doing for you, as well as just the rate card that they give you, and figure out how many other little insidious costs there are in that business. And I've seen all of them. I mean, there are all sorts of costs that are very, very sneaky in this total fulfillment conversation that's worth trying to optimize. Starting very, very basically with, do your packers even understand how what I've just explained works? You know, the bigger the box, the more it costs us to ship. So they need to be incentivized to be using the right size or the smallest box. That can save you probably that's the biggest lever. Just get your packers to understand volumetrics. I'm going to tell you a quick story. We had a review meeting with one of our clients who had joined maybe now a year and a half ago. And he told us a story of the person who was dealing with their courier, I guess, handover. So everything to do with their courier was kind of about to get fired because they were inefficient, weren't getting the job done. They were trapped in some really petty, silly backwards and forwards work to get parcels delivered. So it was what I was talking about, capturing, walking printed paper from A to B. It just was a bit of a mess. And they were dissatisfied. They were unhappy. The business was unhappy with this person, and it was about to come unstuck. They were telling us this about a year later and said the same person, after we did our very simple integration, it wasn't a big, complicated integration that we did with them at all, but that person had been freed up so much so, like probably 7.5 hours a day, was now free. And they had risen right up in terms of what they were able to do. They were handling some of the marketing stuff. They were dealing with stock ordering and inventory, and they were looking after receiving. And I'm probably freestyling here a little bit. I can't remember exactly now what other roles they were on, but they had become the superstar. They were running e-commerce really, really constructively. And it was from a tiny integration. So, you know, in terms of talking about hidden costs, that whole person's job was lost. So whatever their salary was every month was not turning into value for the company. Now, that salary probably hadn't changed a whole lot, but the value was rocketing up. And that's a simple integration. It's a simple change of the courier. So again, think in terms of rates. Yes, you've got to think about rates. It's part of the situation, but don't be lazy about thinking about rates. Think about the total fulfillment situation. Oh, another good point here. Same client, they had reasonably high theft with the courier they had beforehand. I mean, we're talking seven figures a year worth of theft. That's down to 0, having switched across to us. 2 incidents, 2 hijackings, both paid out, so effectively 0 loss. You can't even have a 7-digit conversation and think about rates in the same conversation. You know, you've got to just chip away, and look at every part of it, and that's where the savings often come from. And if you're doing that with a stable partner courier, then obviously you've got that anchor that's sitting there holding you, and you can fix all the other little things along the way. Okay, I think I've made that point. I made a list here quickly of other things that can trip you up. So maybe just jot these points down, and you can always go back into them later. Address quality, okay, data quality. If you send a bad address to a courier, any courier, what are they meant to do with it? They're going to do the same thing you have to do. They've got to double check it. They might do the worst thing and drive to the bad address and go, person's not here. You know, now what do I do? Drive it back to the branch, add a day, add costs, everything else. So address quality is between 30 and 40% of waybills in South Africa have got bad address data. That's from stats that we collect and we average and we look at. And that's not because we're dealing with all the worst culprits in this. I mean, this is just across the board of our clients. We see anywhere between 30 and 40% of those addresses need some kind of correction. For Yuppiechef, that used to look like a human being, just fixing addresses day in, day out. That was a cost opportunity to save. Okay, so packaging I spoke about, but be aware. I mean, it's wrapping, it's labels, tapes, cardboard, printing on the box. Is it really necessary? Could you save R1 or two? You know, I'm speaking as somebody who worked at a company that handwrote cards, so I'm not passing judgment on anybody who goes to elaborate lengths on the packaging, but just be aware those are all R1 costs that you've got to think about. Promotions, I spoke about that box. Just beware that whoever's running a promotion is thinking about the shipping cost attached to that promotion. That's something that you can manage from a top level. Customer service time, I alluded to that as well. How much time is spent frustratedly tracing problems or looking for answers, etc., etc. So customer service time, that's a frustrating one. Problem resolution, you know, do you speak to the same person? Who's dealing with that? Does it end up always having to be escalated and you've got some important person in your business trying to solve a problem around shipping? Can they afford the time to be solving those problems? Probably not. That's a big opportunity cost to try and rectify. Integration, so in-house warehousing coordinated time. Again, who inside a warehouse is busy dealing with the couriers? Is it pretty autonomous and it just runs by itself? Has the courier gone and placed a person there to help you, or is it your staff you're busy paying? And the very, very subtle ones here, I've just written here. Cost of returns, okay? Reasons for returns. Was it the wrong items? Is it your pickers who maybe need to be watched more carefully? You know, that goes all the way into the warehousing. Are the items too close to each other that are very similar but different? Is it easy to make a mistake of picking the wrong item? I've seen it all. So wrong items, damages, misroutes, breakages, those are, the cost of a return is huge, because if the wrong item goes, it's got to get collected and resent back. So you triple your courier charge at the least. So worth making sure that as few returns happen. It also comes down to, I mean, simple things. When you've got a photo of an apple on your site and you're selling this lovely red apple, well, is it a massive apple or a tiny apple? So do you have something to give scale to it? You're like, that's already showing the scale of the apple. It's a simple thing, but let's say it's not an apple. People can guess about apples. What if it's a plate? Okay. And if there's nothing like a knife and fork next to the plate, well, it's hard to gauge if that plate is huge or tiny. And so somebody gets something like, geez, you sold me a side plate. I thought I was getting a dinner plate. And off it goes. It's a return again. So even the imagery and the content on your site has a big effect on how often those things might be returned or not. All right, ease of returns. How easy is it for a company to initiate a return from a customer? Well, I can tell you one thing, coordinating a delivery is a bit of a trick thing already. Coordinating a collection from a customer is much harder, because there's far less frequency and order in that part of a courier's network, usually. So we introduced drop-offs at Postnet. I mean, that's a great way of solving that problem, where if the customer's got a return, they can go and drop the parcel off at a Postnet and it gets sent back to the customer easy. That's sort of innovation within this courier space to solve a problem that you want to solve. I mean, that way within the Postnet, we can consolidate. We can say, well, it's not an urgent return. We can lump it for a week, send it on. Ephraim, yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. It's nice to get tips like that. All right. So ultimately, worst cost to your whole business that can come from all of these little things that I've been talking about is the customer that just leaves and never comes back. Okay? You don't know why. Maybe the process was difficult. Maybe they were frustrated, etc., etc., etc. And retention is the number one goal of any e-commerce business. If you can get somebody to get through the hoops once and they understand it, they will probably come back if it was a decent process. If it's a mess, they will not come back. There's more than enough competition out there in the market. So you're looking for a streamlined, low, as totally low cost as possible, taking all these variables into account. and you want that customer to come back. So that's the biggest cost that people usually overlook without recognizing it. Okay, that's that whole section done. It's 25 past 10. I think this is kind of the key final bit, which will be interesting to you guys. Thumbs up if you're all okay. Can I go into one more topic, and I'll try and wrap it up in 10, 15 minutes. How's that? Okay, and then we open the floor and do some questions. This is my theory again. How many people speak of emailing someone anymore? Okay, how many people write email with a hyphen or a capital E hyphen capital M? It's like this new thing called email that we're all thinking about. It isn't like that anymore. We just mail people. You just mail someone, and you mail someone, you write it in lowercase, and it's a thing. It's just something that's part of life. WhatsApp's the new email. Couldn't agree more. So why do we all take this big effort to write e-commerce with hyphens and capital letters and everything else? In my mind, this is commerce now. We've got to just accept the fact that when last have you bought anything that you didn't have some sense of, I'm talking anything of value, that you already hadn't researched, you hadn't looked up a review, you hadn't kind of done a bit of a price comparison to figure out what is Takealot selling it for, what's somebody else selling it for, is it worth the time for me to wait 3 days? Whether or not you actually bought it online, you've still used the internet somehow. And in that way, you've used e-commerce to some extent. So I kind of think commerce is it. I mean, commerce is online, it's digital, it's electronic, it's informed, it's full of customer opinions and reviews, and you're shopping based on what you know of a product that you found online. Okay, so that's just a kind of free point of view that I wanted to share with you. But let's break that down then and go, well, what are the different ways that people are accessing e-commerce nowadays? Okay, so in my mind, there are sort of three probably major categories. The one is where Yuppiechef used to be. Yuppiechef was purely online, what we would call pure play online. Okay, and you could still say that Takealot to an extent is still pure play online, in that they haven't gone and become a network of stores as well. So if you want something from Yuppiechef, you would have to go online. This gets easier to define if you say you can only get that product from Yuppiechef. Okay, then that product is outletting through a pure play online channel. Simple. And in the old days, that was more frequent than it is now. Nowadays, it's very difficult to find a product that only sells through one place. I mean, even if you look at Versace and like the real top end of the market, they're still outletting through a variety of different places, even if they've got their sort of major store. So pure play online is that, you're just online. Next one would be omni-channel. And you can think of multi-channel and omni-channel, they're not very different. It basically implies you've got more than one route to market. Okay, so let's go back to you selling seeds. You might have a nursery store by yourself. You might have your online store, and you might even have some kind of mail order, I don't know, subscription basis. Okay, that would make you multi-channel. If you got it right, that you can solve people's problems in a consistent way across that whole network. So here's the example. I went into the store, I bought some seeds, I got them packaged, and just had terrible weather. I can't plant these things. My season's over. Is it possible to return them? Well, yes, you can, but I'm not in Cape Town anymore, so I can't drop them off where I bought them. Can you organize a courier to collect it, and will you credit my account the same way or give me an online voucher? So omni-channel starts blurring the kind of capabilities across all your different channels. A voucher must work in all places. A return should work across all places. A special must run across all places. So don't go and you muddy the water when you just do an online sale, and you've also got stores that are not running that sale, because what happens is a customer will go like, I saw this online and I wanted to see it before I bought it. Sorry, ma'am, it's not at the special price in my store. That is multi-channel. That's not omni-channel, and that's not great. From a customer experience point of view, that's not good. I could tell you a story about, I won't mention names, but we bought curtains some time back. We bought them online. They were delivered wrong. Eventually, the collection happened again, backwards and forwards. Eventually, we kind of flipped and wanted to go into the stores, only to be told that no, the promotion's only online, and actually it's expired. So now you're going to have to pay full price for the replacement curtain. That was a very negative experience. Haven't bought curtains from them again, ever. All right, and then both of those topics, or both of those types, the pure play and the omni-channel, they both require you to build or host or develop or do something with your own tech. So you're running your own site. You might have an agency doing it for you. You might have your friend's brother's son, girlfriend doing it for you. It doesn't matter. Somebody's running that for you. If it's done by yourself, it requires time, effort. You're marketing it. You've probably got a marketing company involved to do some paid marketing with Google, or you eventually sort of pass it over to an agency. I mean, I've seen all of these things before. But go back 10, 15 years when Yuppiechef started, there weren't options. You had to build your e-commerce site pretty much yourself. And so we built everything ourselves, right from the ground up, beginning from the listing pages, getting into the searches, getting into the more complicated things. But we even built the back end, the warehouse management systems and all of it. But that gave us these superpowers that we could add features so much faster than anybody else because it was all ours. We could think like that. But that's unusual now. You don't find many businesses are running like that. They're using WooCommerce, Shopify, PrestaShop, Commerce 7, BigCommerce. There's a whole lot of these different platforms now, and they are basically pre-built shell shops that you sign up for. I'm sure many of you are running on those platforms. And you're now paying for an agency probably to sort that out for you. And you've extended what that store does with plugins. So you've got, plugins for the payment gateway, plugins for the courier, plugins for maybe the Zoom tool for your images, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge is sometimes these sites can oversimplify the process of e-commerce. And I use the example right back to this box. Okay, not every site requires you to put in the dimensions of what you sell. That just requires a weight. And part of that is because in the States, maybe where these things originate, you don't need the DIMs. It's not such a big deal for the way couriers in the States work. But here it's a big deal. So we would end up taking on a client and we get all their data, and they say, look, they're always shipping 1 kilo boxes. We go and profile it and everything else until we realize they're sending big, light boxes. So just, I guess here's a tip as well. Make sure that if you're talking to your couriers, you are also storing the dimensions of the products that you're selling, and preferably in the dimensions that they're going to ship in as much as possible, or at least something that's realistic. If this ships just like an apple, well, then that's fine. But if you're going to ship it packed and wrapped and so on, keep that in mind. Here we get to the final point. That's where I'm going to land my conversation. The third access to e-commerce now is marketplace. Okay, and I'm sure this is not news to anybody here, but some of the early marketplaces were Craigslist in the States. Then eBay came along, and then we had Bid or Buy start sort of duplicating it here. We've had Gumtree. We've got aptly named Facebook Marketplace. Then we started having Takealot. Okay, so well, I suppose Amazon began this, but Takealot locally started putting together a marketplace where they would hold some products, their own stock, in their own warehouse, but they would also facilitate businesses like you selling your products through Takealot. So it ends up looking like sold by so-and-so, fulfilled by Takealot. Okay, that's good and well, but I'm sure many of you have had the experience that it's not cheap. It's not awesome in some respects. I mean, sometimes the products that you've put in their warehouse for them come back damaged and destroyed. And that's not a snub on Takealot. It's just the way this would work, I suppose. And at the end of the day, the risk of something like that is that there's a conflict of interest. I mean, it's automatic. It's built in there. They've got their own version of whatever it is that you're selling, let's say USB cable, and your USB cable. How do you know that they're giving yours the right airtime or the right sort of profile? Let's maybe take this one step away and say, well, Amazon, how did they solve that problem? And the history is that they've been caught several times promoting their own products ahead of their marketplace partners, people who are selling product on their platform. Worse than that, they gain all the business intelligence of what's selling well. I mean, if a new type of cable starts selling well from your store, it's very, very easy for them to suddenly go, let's get that and start selling it ourselves £3 cheaper than someone else. So access using these marketplaces is easy in a sense because it gets you off the starting blocks quickly, and you can go and say, I'm going to pay 11% or 12% to have my stuff sold through Takealot. I'm just going to build it into the pricing and off we go. But at the end of the day, I'm the jury's out for me as to what ends up hurting you down the line, you as a small business or you as a business. And the big elephant in the room, you would have all seen this in the newspapers and online and so on. Amazon will be here sooner or later. We can expect a very competitive environment from then on, and Takealot and Amazon are going to both be offering marketplaces for customers. So I kind of thought, well, let me leave this topic and this whole conversation with a question. What do you see when you see that Amazon's coming? Is it an opportunity, or is it a threat? Does it disrupt? You've got to make a choice. If you're already selling through Takealot, do you start doing a bit through Takealot and a bit through Amazon? How does that dilute your effort? How does it change your marketing? Maybe, does one emerge as looking like the better place to be listed? I don't have all the answers on this. I'm kind of curious because I'm sure it's stuff that you would be thinking about. If you're not running your own site and you're using these marketplaces, it's something to consider, because you've probably got 8 to 12 months to give this a proper thought, and then you'll have to decide. So I guess that's me wrapping up. It's a little bit later than I planned to. I wanted to be done by 5:30, but I hope this has been interesting, and I hope it's been thought-provoking. I hope it's been, maybe just a couple of things you've written down that you can go back to and think about for your specific business. Yes, we need to look at packaging. Maybe there's an opportunity to change prices there. Out of interest, Charlize, who's my wingman here, sitting at the Aramex lounge, she actually looks after packaging for us. So that's just convenient. You're welcome to drop her a line and say, look, help us with that, because it is a division of Aramex that we can assist customers with. But yeah, Mike, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I hope it's been interesting to your audience today. And as I said, if some of this sparks future questions or future thoughts, I'm more than happy to come back again, and we can do an eCommerce 202 or do a more pointed, maybe survey and find these are the topics that maybe we must tackle specifically in eCommerce going forward. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, great insights. And as you say, food for thought and what to do, when Amazon comes. And it's going to be an interesting time of our lives here, in South Africa. We all know who Amazon is and what they've done globally. And I suppose it's going to create some excitement. And but like you said, it makes one think a bit more. And but those insights were amazing. I've learned a great deal, Noel. Most of what you said I didn't know, and I think it's invaluable info. And I think most people don't know. So in these kind of things, I often wonder. I was just talking to someone just now. We often buy from a major online shopping store, and these tiny little objects comes in these big boxes. I've never understood that. And someone must be winning somewhere, or someone losing. But from now on, it just makes us think differently, and I think most of us do, especially since in the pandemic now, most of us use a courier service more often than not ever before. So these kind of insights allows us to be a little more intelligent in the road ahead. So Noel, a big thank you, and of course to Aramex, much appreciated, and we will definitely have you back, Noel. It's these kind of insights need to be reminded and added on as we go along in our lives and running our businesses. So Noel, thank you very much. Take good care of yourself, and we'll touch base shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go sit at the lounge for a little bit, and if anyone, I won't be able to stay there too long, but certainly for a little bit. So if anyone's interested in popping in and chatting, that's where I'll be.
Great. Noel, thank you very much. Everybody. And to all our attendees out there, now's the time to do some great networking in a virtual environment. A good time to engage with potential suppliers, potential customers, strategic alliances. And, just because of the COVID pandemic would cause us not to network in a physical environment for that moment. This is, of course, allows us to do that. But, our team is discussing it. We will bring our physical stuff back shortly and combine with our virtual stuff, which makes it an even more exciting journey ahead, Leanne. And I know you're kind of passionate about this topic, and so thank you. And I'm happy to see that load shedding didn't affect you like it has with many, and does all day long with many. But so Leanne, thank you very much, and to all our attendees out there, don't leave us. It's a great opportunity. Go meet the Aramex team, a great bunch of people, and I've got good insights, and you can just expand on that. And Leanne, I suppose at this time we can talk about a bit of networking. Remember the keys of networking. We all know it. Think like a doctor, listen to people, click on everyone's tables, and see how you can help others. Don't forget, be authentic and be caring, be true to yourself, and build relationships. Networking is not about selling. Selling comes down the line. It's about meeting people that you've never met and engaging and rekindling old acquaintances and solidifying new relationships. The time of selling will come as a result of what you do well in that space. So, Leanne, from your side, any key insight and some advice?
Yes, Mike. So you gave some of the best tips when it comes to networking. The biggest one is don't hard sell. You are going to put people off on this platform. This is really about connecting with fellow entrepreneurs, learning and building relationships. So when you connect with people, seek to help others. Like Mike said, think like a doctor, and you might even be the bridge connecting someone to someone else. We know that in this environment, the sales will come, but what's most important here is the building of those relationships. So be kind. For the talkers out there, remember that you must give some time for others to speak as well. I know I'm a talker. Hey, Mike. So one of the most powerful things you can learn to do is listen and see how you can help solve people's problems. Just from a technical point of view, for those who are new to this platform, please don't leave now. Use this time. It can be so valuable. The floor will be open until 12 o'clock. Jump between tables by double clicking. Switch on your camera and your microphone to start the conversations going. And then, Mike, I have one little tip that we can give others, and that is how to create a good elevator pitch. So we've all heard the term elevator pitch. Basically, it's explaining what you do in most people say a minute, but an easy way to introduce yourself without taking up all the time on your table is to complete the following 2 sentences. The first is, when you, and then you add in there a problem that people are facing. So for instance, when you need to generate more sales for your business. Then the next sentence you need to complete is, well, what I do is, and you answer that. So for instance, Mike, when you need to generate more sales for your business, well, what I do is I help businesses become more visible in the digital world, and I help you reach more prospects. So what am I actually? In this case, hypothetically, I would be your website designer or your digital marketing agency. So those are your tips. When you finish the sentence, think of the problem that you are solving in your business. Well, what I do is, and the solution to that problem. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, and just one last thing from my side. And one of the biggest reasons why someone will do business with you to learn to become a nice person. Be grateful, be unforgiving, all those cool things that makes you a nice person, because that's one reason why someone will do business with you. And like Leanne says, talk less, listen more, and listen with empathy. And that'll be a great step to where you need to be in life.
All right, so now we are going back to the floor. We're going to network. Let me, just to break the ice in your tables, introduce yourselves and try this elevator pitch that I just gave you now. Just try it out, see, and as you go, you'll refine it more and more. Then after that, let me suggest that why don't you discuss your e-commerce journey? Are you a rookie? Are you thinking of adding e-commerce to your business? Are you an expert? What can you ask? What can you share? And then after that, there will then be a free networking time. So you will see prompts as you go back to the floor. We will prompt you in this just to break the ice. And then you can use the rest of the time just connecting with like-minded business professionals. Don't forget the Aramex Lounge is at the top right of your screen. And that's it from me, Mike. Anything else you'd like to add?
All good to go. Thank you, Leanne.
All right. Enjoy it, everyone. And we'll see you soon.